Good morning, everyone. Welcome on this surprisingly rainy Monday. This was not what I was expecting. We are moving on with our budget study sessions. A lot of ground to cover today. We're all going to be spending a lot of time together. Thank you for being here. This is the San Jose City Council budget study session for the morning of May 12th. Tony, would you please call the roll?
Kame? Here. Campos? Here. Salas? Here. Cohen? Here. Ortiz?
Present.
Mulcahy? Dwan?
Here. Present.
Candelas? Here. Casey? Here. Foley? Here. Mahan?
Here.
All present.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We, as is typically our practice, will go through a lot of content today, and because it's a council study session focused on our discussion and dialogue and questions for staff and hearing from staff, we will save all public comment until the end of the day. So let's kick off with neighborhood services, which includes lived-in vehicles.
Good morning, Mayor and members of the Council. I'm Jill Bourne, City Librarian and Director of the Library Department. And I am here today with my colleagues in the Neighborhood Services City area, Eric Sullivan, Director of the Housing Department, John Cicerelli, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services, Matt Lesh, Director of Public Works, Rachel Roberts, Deputy Director of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement, and Angel Rios, our Deputy City Manager. Oh, we have a special guest, not on the slide, John Risto from the Department of Housing. Yay.
Transportation.
Oh, housing, transportation. I'm all over the place. Okay, next slide.
Messing you up.
Oh, you totally messing me up.
Sorry.
Okay, like this impressive group of teams before you, the Neighborhood Services CSA is wide-ranging in the core services and programs we offer to all San Joseans. What possibly sets this CSA apart is the way in which our work engages directly with people, and therefore in all areas of the human condition, from the most heartbreaking to the most joyful and uplifting. Our programs that you see here nourish our residents with meals for families and older adults, supportive services for the unhoused, care for our abandoned animals, fresh air in our parks, and poetry in our libraries. We enrich the fabric of our neighborhoods with community celebrations and activations, neighborhood beautification, the safeguards of code enforcement, and even a zoo. We level the playing field with affordable access to summer camps, recreation and pools, educational supports, interim housing, homelessness prevention and rental assistance, even Wi-Fi connectivity, and also actual playing fields. We empower all ages with opportunities to learn, to share knowledge and ideas, to be active, and to build skills that meet their needs to improve their lives, whether it's basketball, navigating systems of care, English as a second language, or earning a coding certification. Our programs engage residents in uplifting themselves and caring for one another and for the spaces where we live in a way that transforms a city of neighborhoods into a community. The Neighborhood Services CSA dashboard also demonstrates the breadth of the CSA programs. A couple of highlights are the increased performance in park condition assessments, on-time resolutions in code enforcement, and homelessness program occupancy rates. Across the neighborhood services aspect of these 5 departments, we see reduced expenditures in PRNS and library departments, and incremental increases from forecasts in the public works, PBCE, and housing programs. In terms of specific proposed budget actions, PRNS is pleased to add funding for Beautify SJ grants for neighborhood support and beautification efforts. Proposed reductions will eliminate senior health and wellness grant programs and scale back free teen drop-in programs at El Viso, Alum Rock, and Berryessa Youth Centers. The library identified reductions to annual contracts that are not anticipated to result in program impacts, also adding one-time funding to offset funding for collections in our capital budget that are limited, and leverages funding held by the San Jose Public Library Foundation to offset costs for College and Career Pathways Workforce Development Team. Housing is continuing previously funded outreach and supportive services to our unhoused residents, eviction program, and program management staffing. Animal care continues contracted veterinary care, and there are also enhancements to code enforcement. Specifically, the manager's budget addendum number 4 describes a focus on parking enforcement enhancements related to expired registrations, capacity and expectations in the oversized and lived-in vehicle enforcement, or OLIVE program, a pilot related to compliance for street sweeping, and more that can be found in the MBA. As a CSA, our focus is on the highest and best services for our community through stewardship of public assets such as parks, trails, gateway corridors, and library resources, and to continue essential services in veterinary care, implementation of recommendations from code enforcement's operational assessment, and improvements to the city's shelter system. In summary, the proposed budget seeks to ensure that core services are maintained in the many areas and programs of PRNS, in preserving library operating hours, in maintaining veterinary services, while implementing planned program improvements to code and animal care, and continuing to deepen the impacts in areas of addressing encampments, the city's shelter system, and alignment with the county. That concludes our formal report. The entire team is here to welcome your questions. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Jill. Okay, we'll turn to colleagues. Do we have questions? Councilmember Cohen. Thank you.
Just one question on our parks. There's a line. I think I saw a line item that had to do with reduction in staffing at some neighborhood centers. Is that related to some of our youth center staffing?
Are you referring to the Neighborhood Center Partner Program?
I think so. I'm not sure exactly what I'm referring to, but I think so.
Yeah, so I believe that's the one you're thinking of. And in that particular one, what we're doing is we're pulling back staff out of some of the hybrid locations. So a hybrid location is where we have both city staff and CBOs, community organizations, in the same space. So none of those community centers will close. And this spring, actually, and next month, I think in June, we're issuing another request for qualifications for nonprofits that want to use our community centers to deliver community services to the neighborhoods around them. So we don't think it'll be a huge impact, but it was a way to sort of trim and find some savings, but still keep the centers open.
Okay, so I understand. So for example, I'll just use the example of the Berryessa Youth Center. That's the one that is in my district. There's weekday programming that's now run by YMCA, but on the weekends, city staff has been running the programming there. The idea is to try to maybe extend YMCA's contract or find another provider to keep it open on the weekend. Is that the intent?
Yeah, that would be ideal if we could find providers to fill those gaps.
But absent that, there's a chance that this will mean that that facility will not be open for public use on the weekends.
Correct.
Okay.
Although we may have other providers there, do we? No, it would be closed.
It would be closed at this point. So that's with the budget, based on the budget today and what we know of today, we are closing that service, and we don't necessarily yet have a replacement for that service for that.
Correct.
Is this just this one center, or is this multiple centers?
No, there are other spaces that are in similar circumstances. This is part of why, a lot of the programming we do is kind of small, like just on the weekend or, a few hours during the week. So that's why we looked at this program and said, well, the impacts are less than cutting other things or reducing other things, and this has some hope because we're able to go out and look for more providers.
So at this point, we'll just hope that that works out. Okay.
Yeah,
No, I hope so. I hope it does.
We're
I hope it
expecting a
does.
good response to the RFQ for sure.
Good. Have we spoken to any of those providers about their interest in being able to expand the service? Do we, like, for
I don't know that
example,
we've spoken specifically at Barry ESSA, but that will be very clear in the RFQ that that is an available opportunity.
Okay. Thank you. And obviously, I am grateful to the whole team for continuing with very minimal impact on all the great service we do in our community. It's very, obviously, everybody knows it's important to me that we continue our 7-day service to the library, that we still have great programming in our community centers and parks. So I'm appreciative that we've figured this out. You know, I'll be keeping an eye on this. I'm hoping that we'll be able to maintain this service for our residents. I know there's people who use these weekend programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate that. All right, everybody woke up. Now we got some hands up. Let's go to Councilmember Salas.
Thanks for the report, of course. And Jill, that was really interesting. Thank you. I wanted to ask you the park condition assessment score. That's overall, but do you have it, is it available to us by park?
Yes, we can certainly share that with you.
So I could reach out and get that information.
Yeah, happy to share. Any park you want to know about, we can tell you what the score is and why the score is what it is.
Terrific, thank you. And then, well, a quick question back to Jill. Jill, when you and I met, you mentioned that you used to have only one security person for all the libraries. Now you have as many, 10 or more. Is that also included in your budget, or does that come from some other some other budget?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, once upon a time, we had a half-time security officer for the system, actually when I first joined the library, and we've grown in hours and locations. So thanks to the support of our city manager and council, we've actually expanded to 10 positions, 9 full-time and 1 part-time, and one of those is a supervisor. Yeah, it's a big improvement.
Thank you, Councilmember. Let me turn now to Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, thank you to our entire staff for your continued service to our residents, especially this CSA provides some of those essential services to our most vulnerable residents, and really some of the staff that residents see on a day-to-day in the neighborhoods. So thank you to leadership and, of course, all of our staff that are out there. I do have just a few questions just in regards to some of the reductions that I see in the presentation. So I wanted to ask, is there any concern from the CSA leadership regarding impacts to services, specifically to low-income youth and families, with the temporary closure of family camp and the reductions to the out-of-school time and after-school education safety programs?
Councilmember Angel Rios, Deputy City Manager. You know, we're pretty pleased about this budget, given that, you know, we really had to take a deep dive and take a look at, you know, how we maximize what we have and making sure that, you know, we're coordinating resources, trying to achieve economies of scale to the extent possible. So we really feel that this has very minimal impact. And then to the contrary, I think what we also did was made sure that we doubled down in especially areas that are kind of more impoverished communities, neighborhoods where we know that they're being impacted by, for example, school closures and other things like that, to show up in a more meaningful way to them. So I think what you see here is a budget that is reflective of that.
Yeah. And thank you, Angel, for mentioning what's happening in Alum Rock, the school closures. And so as we see these programs shutter from the school district, you know, it's also, you know, we got to be careful with what sort of programs we shutter for our day-to-day residents. And then also, of course, everyone here knows workforce development is very much a priority for me. I've talked about it in a lot of the meetings. And I see here there's going to be reduction to college and career pathways and workforce development staffing. How are we going to make sure we're still remaining committed to the level of support we're providing these youth who are trying to go through these workforce programs?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to clarify. Thanks to the incredible partnership that the San Jose Library experiences with our San Jose Library Foundation, we're actually able to utilize funding that the foundation has on hand to essentially not reduce those positions. So that team of staff dedicated to college and career pathways and workforce development will be funded through the foundation.
I see.
Yes.
I see. So it's a transfer of essentially who's going to be funding those
It's
resources.
retaining the exact same position, same staff, just changing the funding source in order to preserve funds in the general fund.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Actually, that's exciting news. So happy to hear that. And then next, I know I got an email, Angel Rios, I think I CC'd you on that. And I think I got it from Pozo, the Portuguese community center that provides a lot of services to our Portuguese population. But I think they're only one of many organizations that receive the Senior Health and Wellness Grant. Can we talk about from what the communities tell me, that program is getting shuttered. Wanted to hear what staff have to say, because from what I hear, they're panicking right now because that serves a lot of our senior populations.
Yep, thank you. Yes, this is probably the most concerning proposal we have this year. For us, this is a very difficult one. This is a grant program. It tends to fund somewhere 10 organizations a year, plus or minus 1 or 2, depending on the year. Grants that range anywhere from $10,000 all the way up to $140,000 a year. Services that range anywhere from social services, and you're just being with seniors and keeping them active, all the way up to services like dental care and dental examinations. So this is about $550,000 worth of grants spread out across those types of organizations. This is one of them, the one you mentioned. Some of them I think will be able to pivot. Some of them, perhaps like the one you're mentioning, may not as a result of this funding loss. This is a long-standing grant. We've been doing this for at least a decade or more, I want to say. So yeah, hard decision. There's no doubt there will be an impact to those organizations, and there will be less access to those services by seniors. I do want to point out, though, that this was done in preservation of the core of the program, and the core of the program is centered around senior nutrition. That's what's happening at our community centers. And then what we do is we wrap around that core services. And so the services that the city provides will still be there. These are services provided by nonprofits. They usually come by the community center. They're there for a day. Maybe they come by each month, that kind of a thing in most cases. But all our social services and pro-social services will still remain. All of the programming, the dances, the planning, the extra services and programs before and after senior nutrition, all of that will remain.
Yeah, and Councilmember, what I would add to that is, as John said, what we attempted to do is really preserve services that are going to prevent social isolation, senior nutrition, those kinds of things, right? And then to also tap into greater coordination with, for example, SourceWise, right, which is really the clearinghouse for state, local, and federal funds to do precisely the type of services that are funded through those grants, right? So our goal is to actually step up our coordination and partnership with SourceWise. They are already present in many of our senior centers. This would mean, though, just the department really coordinating more intentionally and proactively with SourceWise to make sure that any gaps that are created are filled through that partnership. So that is a little bit of a safety net that we have.
Okay, that's good to know. If we could just get some context into how the decision was made, why this program in comparison to other ones?
Well, they're really tough choices. I don't know if the city manager might want to comment on that process, but the Parks Department, PRNS, we had a target of $9.5 million. And thankfully we didn't have to give up $9.5 million worth of programming. It settled at a much lower impact for the department, but it's not without impact. That's just the reality. We have around $3 million in impact, more than 10 FTEs that will go. So it's just a tough time, and next year doesn't look much better. And so it's a difficult decision to make.
Okay, and how are we, I know you commented a little bit about it, both of you guys hinted to it, but how are we going to be working with the individuals who receive the grant to make sure that the impacts are reduced to as much as possible?
Well, to the degree we can, if we can help them identify other sources of funding or maybe combining partnerships, they can always, I just mentioned Councilmember Cohen's question about the request for qualifications. There's a possibility there because we do have, at least in a couple instances, these groups want to be in a stationary place. They don't want to be mobile and running around, but some of them are designed to be mobile. They're trying to get to every single one of our community centers, so they're driving around to them. So to the degree that we would certainly still allow them to come into the facility and work with us if they're able to find other sources. It doesn't have to come from us. And those are all possibilities. We just haven't identified them at this point.
Okay. All right, sounds, maybe I'll connect her to one of you guys offline. Sounds like she may not have the whole picture, and I think it'd be good for somebody to connect with her. But thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Councilmember. Appreciate it. Councilmember Campos?
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to thank the staff for providing an overview of this important CSA. I want to spend my time focused on the need for additional funding for homelessness prevention and the importance of the city's investment in childhood education and childcare, ECE for short. So to begin, on homelessness response and solutions, we understand that shelters play an important part in addressing homelessness, right? Shelters are part of that continuum of care that our community needs to ensure we have a long-term sustainable plan to address and end homelessness in our community. Without integrating supportive services and permanent housing options, what we find ourselves in is a bottleneck with inefficiencies and limited opportunities to achieve that long-term success that I know we all desire. So I would like for us as a council to be able to spend more time working with our county, talking about how we are building out the continuum, how we are creating solutions for both outflow from EIH into permanent housing, as well as prevention, so that we can stop the inflow of people becoming homeless in our community. What we're doing when we take time to have those conversations is we're providing opportunities for safe, secure, and affordable housing for our working families, for our seniors on a limited income, and for young adults who are in need of resources like affordable housing and communities built for them so that we can effectively combat against homelessness. When we place an undue burden on individuals who are experiencing homelessness and oversimplify a complex policy challenge to make it appear as though it is an individual's choice, what we're doing is we're creating very real risks and challenges to both individuals experiencing homelessness as well as our society's ability to work together in addressing this shared concern, right? What we're doing is we are desensitizing our community about the realities of this problem, and we're creating deeper rifts between our neighbors who are housed and our neighbors who are experiencing homelessness. And as city staff shared with us in previous presentations, for every one homeless household that we get into housing in San Jose, 1.8 more are becoming homeless for the first time. So there really is a need for us to double down on prevention and understanding how we can stop the inflow of people who are becoming homeless, because in Santa Clara County, over 4,100 households fell into homelessness in 2024, and 21% of those households were families with children. So there is a real cost that we are not measuring by putting all of our eggs in one basket with shelters. There will be a very real, unintended, unaccounted for consequence of losing Measure E dollars that are supportive in building the affordable housing our community needs. And as we see that the need to fund emergency interim housing operations will grow from $20 million to $30 million over the coming years. That subsidy is going to come from our general fund unless we start to have those very real conversations now as a council and as a community about how we can, make sure that we are keeping our promise as a city to build the shelter that our community needs to address the immediate impacts of unsheltered homelessness, but also not missing the mark on leaving a legacy where we can actually put an end to homelessness by investing in the full continuum and the full pipeline that is needed to stop and address homelessness. Without affordable housing in the pipeline for unhoused people and shelters to go to, we are creating a false solution that is both ineffective and financially irresponsible. And as we prepare to vote on our budget, we have to remember that this is just as much about fiscal responsibility as it is about the values that we hold as a community. And the biggest mistake that we can make is leaning too far to one side or the other, right? Our job as a council is to find the right balance. And so at the very least, what we have to be doing is investing in the programs that we know are sustainable and that address the source of the crisis. And so I encourage my colleagues to ask questions about the cost effectiveness and demonstrated success of homelessness prevention, because instead of spending $40,000 of taxpayer money on services for each individual unhoused person, we can invest $4,000, a fraction of the cost, to prevent that person from ever becoming homeless in the first place. So I hope that my council colleagues are hearing the message that focusing homeless prevention funding on our youth in particular will ensure that they never become the chronically unhoused adults that we are experiencing real challenges with right now and trying to bring indoors into shelter and keep housed long term. So one of the key ways that I also see an opportunity for us to do so is by making sure we're not losing funding for programs like early childhood education, which right now the proposed budget shows eliminating the Friend, Family, and Neighbor Caregiver Support Network program, which has 2.0 full-time FTE field literacy program specialists and 1 FTE library clerk position. So a question to our friends from the library is, given the potential elimination of Head Start and the reduction in federal funding for other essential services and programs supporting families with young children, what is the impact that eliminating such a program focused on access to early care and education for low-income families in San Jose, what kind of impacts might we be facing if we eliminate that program?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember. The Family Friend and Neighbor program that you mentioned is a program that was launched in 2021, I believe, to enhance the skills, quality, and sort of the professionalism of the family, friend, and neighbor workforce, which is providing childcare in homes, which is a large percentage of childcare in our city. So to address your direct question about what is the greater impact, I think that, to your point, as we see unexpected changes happening in terms of federal funding for programs like Head Start, right? And there's a lot of uncertainty around how the county and the state are going to be able to implement programs for not only young children, but also for their caregivers. That is something that the city team is working closely with our intergovernmental relations team on to track and see what actually ends up being implemented and what those impacts are to the city. So I think that is a broader conversation we should have about the city's position on how we're going to continue to support early childhood education. This program itself has served at the max, I think we have 186 participants. It has been successful in terms of supporting their certification process. I think some of the biggest outcomes are in areas of, or some of the benefits of the program are in area of being able to be a very high touch and supportive program to help achieve actual certifications that allow folks to go into the childcare workforce, and also to improve the quality for the children in their care. And also just because of the way it's managed, it is a highly culturally relevant program. So it really adapts to the needs of our individual residents. So I think that there will be an impact. Our goal in terms of not seeing this impact until the next fiscal year would be able to really explore what is the county approach that we could partner with? What is the approach of community partners working in this space? And how could we really maximize our partnership to ensure that the folks who've been in this program may continue into other programs that might help continue to support their needs.
Thank you for that response. You know, my colleagues know that I come from a background of early care and education. For those who didn't know, preschool and the early years are the most segregated time in a child's life because of the way that the child care industry is set up to only be able to offer families very limited options that are very much dependent on their income. And so the supplemental programs that our library provides to our local families to try to work against the injustice systems that currently exist in our community are a lifeline to ensure that we are building a city that really allows and incentivizes every family to prosper. So it's programs like this that cause me pause and worry and concern about the trade-offs in our budget, and wanting to make sure that we are really having a values-driven conversation about how we can ensure a city that is functional for everybody. Because at the end of the day, I hope that we can all agree that as a city, we should be fighting poverty, not people in poverty, and we should be moving forward on a budget that reflects that value and that vision that ensures that we are building stability into the lives of our neighbors who you know, most need it and most benefit from a strong government that works for people. So thank you for answering that question, and thank you for hearing my comments.
Thanks, Councilmember. Appreciate that. Just to your earlier point about collaboration with the county, I think it's well taken. We largely work on our shared homelessness strategy through the community plan to end homelessness, and we are nearing the end of our second 5-year cycle. And so this is a great opportunity for every member of the council to engage with our counterparts on the Board of Supervisors and even request staff level meetings. I maintain a one-on-one on a monthly basis with the board president, and then on a recurring basis, typically every couple of months, with the other members of the Board of Supervisors. As we get into the second half of this year, after we close out this fiscal year and pass this coming year's budget, we'll be working more intensively. I know there's a lot of staff work that's already happening here. Eric and others have been engaged in this conversation going back to last year, but as we get to the end of this 5-year community plan to end homelessness, I think we're in need of a major overhaul, and I think actually some of the work our housing department's done to model out what it would look like to provide a safe space with services for every person on our streets on a reasonable time frame is likely to be a key component there. Certainly looking forward to a lot of Measure A projects coming online over the next couple of years, and continued throughput between both kind of shelter solutions up that continuum, or along that continuum toward more permanent solutions as available. So anyway, just a good moment for everyone on this dais to be engaging with our county supervisors as we start to hone in on a plan for the next 5-year shared service model, if you will, service delivery model with our partners at the county. All right, we still have quite a few hands up. Let me turn now to Councilmember Candelas.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I guess I have a few for various departments, so bear with me as I ping around. The first is for Jill, our San Jose Library. Last week we had a town hall in our district with regards to the budget and the proposed budget, and I was asked a question with regards to library fines and fees for our students. So, you know, I guess the first is with regards to our late fees or fines. Are they still waived for everybody across the board, or is it just my understanding it's just children and or the youth, which I used to be?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, through council action previous years, there are no late fines for children up through teens. And last year, there was a one-time waiver for all other late fines. We've had late fines waived for seniors on some years, but last year was all other late fines. Certainly, costs for replacements, damage, lost materials are still in place, and there's alternatives to earning back those points. But There was a one-time waiver last year in the budget. We are currently working with the city manager's budget office to address the next year, and I think that will potentially come forward at the fines and fees discussion.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate it. That's great. City Manager McGuire?
Yeah, so I think we're working on an MBA that would waive the rest of the fines as directed in last year's budget message that the council approved. So kind of doing a two-parter this year.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. I know some folks in our community are curious about that, and I know with regards to folks in the community, the library is a safe place to access information and to grow. So I appreciate the work on that and look forward to that MBA. The next question I have is for Matt with regards to our investment this year in the contracted veterinary service. Can you speak a little bit towards this investment and how it will help hopefully meet our service delivery goal of caring for animals in our community? Maybe just briefly high level touch on that.
Sure. So our contract services, so in the proposed budget is $200,000 for contracted vet services, and primarily for spay and neuter services. So we use this as a kind of whole catalog in terms of approach to dealing with all of the animals that are coming in. TNR, neutering animals, is that fun multivariate problem that we engineers like to solve, where we can't control the inputs, the outputs, or necessarily the tools we get to use on them. So $200,000, the average cat neutering services through our contract service is about $200 per cat. And so it'd be about 1,000 additional cats that would get neutered with one of our, and so what we use those, possibly using those contract services to do some of our larger dogs or some of those other things, so because dogs take a longer period of time. Our vets are faster, our in-house vets are faster, can do a higher volume, so to free up, so we look at it as, how do we use this as a catalog approach?
Capacity building.
Yeah, exactly, and so it's again, multivariate, lots of challenges because we need to know who's in the building and what, in terms of the trappers can bring in any given time. So it gets us about 1,000 additional animals, but we are using those services now. This is to renew those contracts and to pay for those fees now. We already have that in the budget. This is a renewal opportunity. I don't know that it'll grow much in terms of capacity towards what we currently have, but we'll add some, and it does create and help solve that problem.
No, thank you. And you know, last week we had a NSC update on this, and so you know, I know there's a lot of folks in our community who are paying close attention to the work, and it's no small feat. I think you mentioned something to the tune of one of the largest audit recommendations tackling in a year's time frame. So it's not an easy target, but I'm excited to see this help free up capacity within our budget for our animals. Okay, the next question I have is regards to our Olive program. So, John, I'm glad you're here. And you know, I think this year we're proposing more resources to our Olive program, and I guess I'm curious to our approach. You know, given how limited our tax dollars are, and you know, we're 5 months into the current program, and so you know, how's the program coming along? You know, what is the preliminary data telling us? Because I'm definitely interested in seeing the net effect of the work that we're currently doing specifically in this area. The approach.
Thank you, Councilmember. John Rista, Director of Transportation. So yes, the Olive program, we're about 20 sites in right now, engaged in those various sites in either just posting or actually actively abating. So far, the rate is actually pretty good for voluntary displacement of those vehicles. You know, we give them a week, we post 1 week, and then we visit again for the abatement time frame, and then we clean when they're gone. So that's a pretty good rate for people moving on their own. So we've towed maybe 12 vehicles so far. That's not a lot. We do know that those vehicles that we are asking to move are just moving to likely other places within the city. So that is actually the gist of the enhanced idea that we're proposing in the MBA, which we would also continue the sites that we're going to be doing the next year, another 50, but we also know that as those vehicles start to move around, some smaller sites that are not on our list are still going to be some pain points for some neighborhoods. That's the idea behind the enhanced enforcement, is actually having a team that would be looking out for those, as well as the identified engagement list that's going to be redone. We're going to do another 50 sites next year.
Okay, and then, I mean, part of the goal is to transition folks from lived-in vehicles to other sheltering options. And so I'm assuming part of the actions that we're taking this year is to help us do that, if not, if I'm
Yeah, I can speak to it. Councilmember Lee Wilcox, Assistant City Manager. One of the things that this team has been working on, obviously with Olive, but the opening of Berryessa RV safe parking, that site filled very, very quickly once it was open. Us providing real estate as well as several departments, we've been scouring the city looking for other sites for, you know, other programs that would be very similar to Berryessa RV parking. I think on the thread of what makes most economical sense, and given the budget limitations, I don't think the city has the money to do more Berryessa sites. So we are going to start thinking through other programmatic things that, you know, we'll want flexibility on through the fall, such as buyback programs, or us having a yard where some of these can go, but really trying to get these things online. So as we start to have the hotels and Cerrone and some of the other shelters open up in the fall, that we actually have a place for these individuals to go. So we need to sequence that and arrange it appropriately, given the timing.
Right. No, and I appreciate that. I guess my question was more for, you know, if we're, you know, our outreach and the work that we're doing with you know, moving folks, so folks, you know, in an area that's hammered with lived-in vehicles, and, you know, the quality of life is affected, and then, but what's the net effect on neighbors down the block, neighbors, you know, in adjacent streets, council, whatever, because we're essentially, you know, moving the problem from one area to the next. And so I guess, you know, part of the recommendations that we're seeing is, you know, we want to be able to get people to go from lived-in vehicles to other sheltering options, and that was specific. And I guess I'm curious to see how that's panning out, because if we're throwing millions of dollars on this, you know, just to basically sweep people from one area to the other, I think we need to be pushing towards, you know, the end goal, which is getting people out of RVs and into other sheltering options. Not saying, you know, not dictating what that is and giving maximum flexibility for that, but that's a concern of mine, because I'm seeing it in my district. And you know, at the same time, I mean, we're also which my next question funnels to Eric, and you know, we're proposing to bring our outreach services in-house, which is great, because that gives us a lot more flexibility to deploy outreach and intervention outside of the, you know, core areas, right? And so now my question is, you know, what are we doing with the contract work we currently have, and how are we making sure that we are being judicious, again, with those limited tax dollars, to make sure that, you know, if we're expanding in-house, we are sliding out or transitioning some of those dollars that we have, because they're in the millions of dollars for our outreach contracts.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember. So Eric Sullivan, Director of Housing. So we're going to be looking to compress our contracts with our two primary providers who do outreach, as we're bringing more of the services in-house in order to achieve just improved data management and collection, particularly given the diversity of options that we have for safe units and spaces and shelter throughout the entire portfolio. So we'll be compressing those contracts, capturing those savings, and then continuing to maintain or potentially build out more internal and direct outreach workers.
Great. No, I'm glad to see that, and I look forward to seeing how we can reinvest those funds elsewhere. And you know, I see my blinking light. It doesn't really happen often for me, but I'm gonna, since it doesn't, I'm gonna ask one more question, just because it's so important with regards to our, you know, something Councilmember Ortiz spoke to. I think I mentioned it in NSC last week when we got an update. Is on senior health and wellness grants, and you know, I think this is something that folks are attuned to, and I mean, the direct nexus to who's becoming homeless, and at the rate, it's older adults. And so, you know, at the same time, I understand is it our core service? Not necessarily, But if we're looking at the negative ramifications or impacts to this disinvestment without that ramp, I get a little hesitant on that. So it's not necessarily a question; it's more so a comment. So I guess maybe I can. I mean, how do we soften this, John? I mean, is there any way to do that, or is it just a rip-off Band-Aid from one year to the next? That's my question to you, I guess. It's not an easy question.
And I would just repeat what I was telling Councilmember Ortiz, is that, we're happy to try to help or point to other sources of revenue. Even Eric and I were just sitting here talking about a potential source. So where we can help, we can. We'll try. But I don't have a way to guarantee that they can be funded.
No, I know, and I don't expect you to, but in the coming weeks, I guess this is something that we're going to be thinking about, and maybe I'd like to think through some of the options or how we can soften that impact, whether it's the legal services, whether it's an augmented engagement for seniors, partnerships. I don't know, but I'll leave it at that, and I don't have any more time remaining, but I'm done talking.
All right, thanks, Councilmember. Appreciate those comments. Let me turn now to Councilmember Mulcahy.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the report from the team in the box. Just a couple of questions. So Jill, starting with you, library system relatively unscathed at the moment relative to the budget, but one of the things that heard a lot from advocates of libraries is essentially the raw material that makes up our libraries, and that's books. What does that look like this year, this coming year, for our ability to buy more books? Are you able to, I wasn't able to find some line item info on that, so curious on that.
Thank you, Councilmember. That's a good question, and that is largely because the acquisitions budget, which we call it for books and materials, lies actually in our capital budget. And so that line item, just due to limited funding in capital, is a bit restricted in the coming year, which is why you see an offset through the city manager's proposed budget in the general fund to try to offset that in one line item for about $500,000. And that is something that we are going to continue to work with the city manager's budget office on over the course of the year to ensure that we are not experiencing dramatic reductions in our purchasing power. We are very aware that, and we work closely together, that actually over time that budget needs to be increasing based on need, demand, as well as just year-over-year cost increases for inflation and the fact that digital resources are more popular than ever. And the licensing requirements for digital resources are different and can be more expensive, especially the most popular resources. But they're very powerful and can reach throughout our city without late fees and without the need to return them and things like that. So it's I could talk for hours about our library collection, but in general, we are aware that there is a constricted funding right now, and that we are looking for ways to solve that within the fiscal year.
Great, thank you. So I think this is for John, and maybe a combo, but goes to community centers, services for seniors, and I appreciate the comments of my colleagues, and specifically Councilmember Ortiz. So District 6 has the benefit of 3 community centers within it, and that doesn't go unrecognized that that's a wealth of service for the district, but we have a very underserved community center in Gardner, right? It's a beautiful center, really a beacon for that community that, as we've talked about, has gone underserved there. And the senior program, however, is one that has been, very resourceful and very compelling to keep that neighborhood connected. And I'm really happy to hear that the nutrition program is not affected. But do we have enough specificity where you could tell us, for example, so that we are going to be helping to communicate to the seniors that are already being serviced there, how much of the program will get cut? Out of that 500,000, plus that is getting cut there. Do we have enough specificity so we can help, to Councilmember Candelas's comment, maybe supplant some of those services elsewhere?
Yes, we definitely have enough information that we will be able to communicate. And in fact, the release of the budget was really holding us back. We don't like having to wait this long to let providers know they may be impacted. It doesn't give them a lot of time to prepare. At Gardner in particular, we're running the RFQ I mentioned earlier, has a special part in it for Gardner specifically, because Gardner, we have almost $1 million of money from the Google Community Benefit Fund to help do more programming at that community center than there is currently. But the impacts that they'll typically see are, you won't have the organization come by that does a free dental check. You won't have other organizations coming by maybe that, do the heart checks or things like that, or help you with your taxes. Those are the kind of things. It doesn't affect the programming that we have as a city there. It affects the programming that we bring in, on an occasional basis to all the community centers. They all go around to all of them.
So, we have not been part of the RFQ piece of this process, so I'm not sure what we're asking for those services, but are you suggesting that there is a senior ask in that RFQ, potentially?
It's very focused on seniors, but we're also going to start bringing more youth programming into there as well. As you know, we've shoestringed a budget there to run the nutrition program and some social programming, but we don't run nearly enough as we would run in a regular community center. So all of that will be enhanced. We've had multiple meetings with the seniors there and talked to them about, what do you want? What things are you interested in? So we want to make sure that that's reflected in the request for qualifications, so that when we get responses, those responses are reflective of what the seniors have said they want.
Great. And we've been talking a lot about this as well, with you and your team, but just want to make sure we're continuing to communicate so that we can be good advocates and or help, with the communication with the folks that are getting those services now, because we've been really trying to continue to invest time and in our relationship with that center specifically.
Yeah, and my department is ready to help any of you with that kind of a communication.
Great. Thanks, John. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councilmember. Appreciate it. Let me turn now to Vice Mayor Foley.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And at this point, since I'm later in the list, most of my questions have been asked, but I do have a couple of questions. One is, Jill, regarding the late fees, I thought we waived them permanently last year, but you're saying we only waived them one time, and we're getting an MBA that's going to modify that?
That is correct, Councilmember. They were waived on a one-time basis. And as a solution, based on the conversation here at the hearings, and the MBA is, I believe, proposing to be able to offset them on a permanent basis.
Okay, as I recall, the fines was not a huge number that we were waiving anyway, so it's not a huge hit to the budget.
Correct.
I don't know if you have those numbers, but
fines,
it seems to me it wasn't a very big number.
Yeah, we're tracking at about $36,000 for the year.
And this is Jim Shannon, City's Budget Director. We feel really good about the MBA to bring forward to waive the fees permanently.
Okay, great. I have a question about ebook fees and extensions or renewals. I understand that there is a tremendous wait list on some of our more popular ebooks. So what are we doing to encourage people, since we don't have the fines for ebooks anymore, to remind them that someone else might be waiting for that book, and please finish up and release it?
I just love how nerdy this question is. This is library life. I don't believe we ever had fines on late ebooks, because they just disappear off your device. So there's a lovely, efficiency to that. But there are wait lines for e-resources, because they are, typically in the most popular cases, more costly and high demand. Part of the MBA that we're bringing forward is actually some work we've done over the course of the year around really policy level work and strategy work around managing our e-resource collection and ensuring that there is more availability within our existing funding for residents of the city and the county. So really looking at how do we maximize usage, maximize availability, and our team has just done an incredible job of pulling together all the data around the collection usage, and that is part of the proposal that we're coming forward with the MBA, to be able to utilize essentially that data around usage to maximize for our local residents. We have seen, since we've been implementing some of these strategies, that the availability is already going up, which is super exciting. And just to continue doing that data research in order to figure out how to maximize the most high demand services so that we can track those wait times and reduce them for our patrons.
Great, thank you. Do you ever have an opportunity to reach out to the community and survey them? I know I have some close friends who use ebooks regularly.
Yeah.
That's why I asked the question, and I'm sure they'd be willing to participate in any type of survey or outreach.
Yes, we do pretty robust community surveys. Some of the results are reflected in our dashboard and in our performance metrics, but we have others. And one of the things that we have consistently seen is, although our overall, service quality rate's quite high, one of our vulnerabilities is really around availability of collections, and that's our awareness that we need to make collections more available, both digital and in print, and really take care of the collection budget in order to meet the demand, which, even for print materials, surprisingly continues to grow.
Yeah, great, thank you. I am glad to see that the library hours are not impacted in this particular budget. Councilmember Cohen and I have been advocating for the library since we've both been on council and before that, so I'm glad to see where that is. I want to move over to the Olive program and really the one-off vehicle. There's the Olive program focuses on a lot of vehicles in one particular area and designated an area, but what are we doing about the one-offs? We all have these in our districts, and there are people living in the neighborhoods. In fact, they may have even been moved from an Olive site, and now they're in our neighborhoods, which is one of the unintended consequences of the Olive program. But how are we addressing their bio-waste?
Thank you. John Risto, Director of Transportation. And yes, Councilmember, the MBA 4 has a proposal within it that is intended to address that need that you're just describing. So if you remember the Olive program, we identify a number of sites, 30 this year and 50 next year. The MBA is intended to go after those one-off or smaller clusters. We're concentrating on the big clusters of vehicles. The MBA describes the process that we would be adding a new enforcement effort to go after those, whether or not they were relocated from an abatement that we did or are just in a location that's 1, 2, or 3 vehicles. So absolutely intended to do exactly what you're describing.
Okay, thank you. There's additional frustration, not just over that, but the response from staff. When you just have one, we get statements that you're going to hear from us in 30 days. Frankly, that's unacceptable. So how can we, I know it's a one-off and there are other big areas that are being impacted by this, but the neighborhood community, frankly, doesn't care whether it's 1 or 50. They care that it's 1 and the bio-waste is being dumped in their neighborhood, and what can they do? So how can we, or maybe you could let us know as council offices, how are we supposed to address these one-off situations?
So the OLIVE program was intended to be that proactive in identifying those larger clusters. So we didn't really have a resource to go after what you're describing as the 1 or 2 vehicles that are still problematic, no doubt about it, but we just didn't have that resource. And so as we developed and built and designed OLIVE, it's working as planned. It just didn't include, so that's a gap. That gap is hopefully going to be met by the new MBA that, if approved, would provide us that resource to be able to address those. It's also including a much higher level of coordination on the bio-waste issues with some of the RVs that are being managed right now by our Beautify team. So we're trying to actually increase or enhance the ability for bio-waste dumping, and that's a new program we're trying to also coordinate up through. So.
Okay, and are we looking into a city-owned bio-waste dumping site?
I guess you could call it that. These are.
I don't know what to call it besides
potentially,
that. Potentially. Discharge site.
Yeah, manhole covers that are on the sanitary sewer system within either streets or just off of streets. So we're still trying to figure out how that would actually work or where that would be located and how to do it. But so I guess to answer your question, yes, they would be city-owned sites like that.
Okay, great.
Councilmember, if I could just add on the bio-waste, we're running that program out of PRNS, and it's serving about 600 of those vehicles. So there's a lot that are served, and it's 1-offs and 2-offs. So typically, obviously, we don't do the towing and removal of the vehicle, but if it's a problem, there's a lot of trash on the sidewalk or they're dumping bio-waste. If that comes into us, we will go and inspect that situation, try to get them onto the bio-waste program, get them to clean up their area, try to get them to be a bit more organized. It doesn't remove the vehicle from the neighborhood, but there are services that can come to try to alleviate some of this activity, at least periodically, while we're waiting to figure out what to do about it.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Aside from that, I really appreciate the work that you're doing and the impact on your budget that this is going to have. I did have questions for code enforcement, but I'll leave those for another day. And that's it for me. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Appreciate it. All right, let's turn to Councilmember Kameh.
Thank you so much. And having gone through many, many budgets in other organizations, in times of plenty, things are so much easier budget-wise. In times of shortages, it really takes leadership and, to manage all that you do and reduce as much impact to the community. So I really want to say thank you, because when we started off last fall, thank you to our city manager, Jennifer McGuire, who really took action right away, and everyone has really done an amazing job. And I know that it's never easy, plus there's other exterior forces out there that is still unknown, so and a moving target, so I know that it's really tough. So thank you for presenting what could be beneficial to the community. I wanna ask about the OLIVE program, and I wanna say I appreciate it. My community appreciates it. I think that we weren't sure how this was going to turn out, but I noticed that in the MBA you mentioned that a lot of it was voluntary, so I think that's positive. And I know that some that had come back, we went back to say you can't be here. So I think that voluntarily people did move, and it is a work in progress. So I call it adaptive management. So thank you for that. I did have a question about the expired registration. This is assuming that it's going to be for all vehicles that are out there?
Councilmember, yes, John Risto again. Yes, it would be a proactive approach for the entire city for all vehicles that are unregistered. Right now, the law allows, if it's been unregistered for 6 months, to be towed, but we want to start a little bit more easy on that and actually go do vehicles that have been unregistered for 1 year for that first year that we start the program.
Yeah, and it's only in the public right-of-way. It's not like on private property or anything like that, correct?
I had to look up there to find out if that was true, and yes, that's true, just in the public street right away.
Okay,
Yep.
great. All right. And then, you know, I appreciate, as you're moving forward with expanding the OLIVE program, that you have the temporary towaway zones. I do know that it doesn't always happen, but in certain locations, there are no signs whatsoever. And in my district, one of the OLIVE locations has no signs whatsoever. And previously, it was my understanding that we couldn't enforce, you know, like big trucks or oversized vehicles in the area. So is that not the case anymore? Or how is that, how are we going to address that? Because my understanding had been that if there's no sign, it's very hard to enforce. So I'm just wondering, well, are we going to put signs on or not? Or what is the plan?
So the OLIVE program is placing temporary towaway
Right.
signs. That's the program, and that cadence works every week, a new location. Those temporary signs will stay up a little bit longer after we clean to hopefully deter return vehicles. We do inspect those areas, every one that we have done so far, on a 14-day and then a 30, 60, and 90 to make sure vehicles are not returning. So for the OLIVE program does have a permanent towaway, large vehicle enforcement signing program that's built into that program for 10 sites. So, and we're doing that evaluation analysis right now to recommend which of those 10 sites might receive. I think that's what you're talking about, is like
Yes.
a permanent signage so there wouldn't be return. So the OLIVE program has that, and we will be determining that and then recommend those 10 sites back to council soon, I guess. I'm not sure exactly if we have a schedule for that. We're actually doing the second citywide inventory of all the oversized vehicles right now, and we should wrap that up by the end of May, so that'll inform us as well as to where those 10 sites might be. Going forward, that is the plan is actually that if we need to post those or place permanent signs, that we would have done that sort of safety analysis that's required by the vehicle code to determine that a oversized vehicle at this location poses a safety risk.
Mm-hmm.
That's all going to be done within that program as well.
Will that be done like soon, or the fall, or the end of the year, or?
That's a good question. I'll have to get back to you on no
Yeah,
schedule
that's
for those
fine.
10.
That's fine. I think it'd be
it's
good
part
to
of the
know.
first program, so we intend to do those fairly soon. I just don't have a schedule for that right now. But
Okay, thank you, thank you. I also know that following up on some of my colleagues, you know, it's always good to have good information. And when Councilmember Campos talked about the prevention of homelessness and looking at that, I think that it would be very helpful to have data to be able to say what has worked. I know that we're never going to be able to fully fund all of the prevention that is needed out there, but I think that in the absence of more detailed information, I think that it would be good to understand and know, you know, if we were to have, because I know that previously it was 15% of the Measure E dollars, what would it mean to bring it to the 10%? What would it mean to maintain it at 15%? And it'd be nice to have more information about that. So if that is possible, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, and then the last thing, I guess, is sort of a general question maybe to the city manager. If we don't agree with the way that MBA 3, you know, prioritizing our work, many of the things say that it's completed. Do we work with the different departments, or do we work with you, or what is the appropriate time to bring up that?
Yeah, we're going to talk about it later this afternoon, or yeah, today.
Today?
This
Oh, okay.
afternoon, we're going
All
to,
right.
under the strategic support CSA, so let's talk about it then.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That is all I have.
Thanks, Councilmember. Appreciate it. Turn now to Councilmember Dwan.
Thank you for the presentation. And I know that city as a whole, we're doing a lot more for less, and we're lacking resource and funding. And I really, truly appreciate that you guys continue to do a great job supporting our community out there. I do have about 4 questions. Hopefully I can narrow it down. So, this is for John. I believe we have more than 200 parks, correct? And out of those 200 parks, do we have, how many of those are adopted with private company or group, if you will?
I don't have that breakdown in front of me. I believe about a little over 100 or around 100 are adopted, 90 in the high 90s, so less than half.
So I think if we can work on getting more private and adoption to those parks, that would reduce our resource, would supplement. When I look at Cesar Chavez Park and J. Paul Company, who have done a great job in vitalize and make it look great. And I think it's important that we reach out to many different groups or private company that can adopt. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. We do corporate volunteer events as a team building activity. It's something we did a lot of before the pandemic. It kind of slowed down because office life kind of changed, but it's coming back, which is nice. But that presents opportunities like the one you're talking about for adoption or sponsorship or something like that.
Thank you. I have a question for Eric. I agree with Councilmember Campos. When we can have some type of saving, for example, we spent about $65,000 for an unsheltered be out in the street. If we were able to put them inside a pre-engineered modular shelter, it would only cost us around $16,000. So therefore, we're saving approximately $49,000. Out of $49,000, we can save 10 family almost from falling to being homeless. Can you tell me, if we were to implement those programs, how fast can we do it, and how much saving approximately we will be saving in order to do prevention?
Thank you, Councilmember, for the question. So Eric Sullivan, Director of Housing. So I want to just kind of provide some context first for my answer. When we look at prevention and our investments there, which we currently invest in, and then the work that we do around the shelter system, since prevention doesn't have a single door of entry, there are many different doors in which individuals fall into homelessness. Where our point of interaction is at this point, through our investments with the county, it's capturing them when they make contact with the shelter system, it's capturing them in communities sort of further up in the pipeline. A lot of our current shelter system provides direct services to those who have been primarily chronically homeless, so they've already sort of passed that opportunity to kind of get captured within the system. So when we look at and sort of raise the question of how do we quantify the investments around prevention as direct and applicable savings to our work around shelter services, it's not necessarily an either or a causation relationship, because we're to a degree serving different populations. Since shelter system is primarily chronically homeless who are on the street today who've already fallen through the system, and prevention tries to capture individuals before they even get in or just when they hit the system, there's not necessarily a direct relationship between the two. So somewhat difficult to kind of answer the question on savings. Yes, there's savings in the very broad sort of 5,000 foot in the air when we look at strategic investments, how we're ensuring that we're limiting the inflow who then eventually become chronic homelessness. Yes, there's savings, it's cost effective, it's time limited in the investments around prevention, but to a degree it's sort of separate from the work we do around shelter for our existing primarily chronic homeless individuals.
Thank you for that answer, and eventually we're going to have to go to the pre-engineered modular shelter to accommodate the large amount of unsheltered residents coming to our city. I have a question for Jill. as we abate for example, the Tully Library, as we abate the unsheltered away from the creek and we reduce amount of unsheltered around the library, is it possible somewhere that we can reduce the amount of money that we pay for security and then use that money to buy more books?
Thank you, Councilmember. I love how you're thinking. I do think that there are locations like the Tully branch that may be overly impacted on the exterior of the facility, and we've discussed some of those impacts, and we're working collaboratively with our partners in the police department as well as housing and Department of Transportation around ensuring that our exteriors and our parking lots are safe and well-maintained and welcoming for the whole community. But in terms of the overarching question, what we could do is continue to track our ability to reduce the impacts of the exterior of the buildings. And over time, if we were seeing less of a need for regular security forces, we're always looking at our budget. The budget director, Jim, knows where I'm constantly looking at how do we best use the limited resources we have. So that could be an opportunity to look at where we don't need to spend additional funds anymore and dedicate those into our core services such as our collections. We are not there though. I want to make it really clear that we're kind of on the early side of that process with security especially.
Well, thank you. We address a lot of these issues by multiple prongs, as you mentioned, from our PD to our housing and to abatement and so on. And I just want to say thank you to make it a safe place for our children to be. I have a question for Matt Lish. Out of the $200,000 that you're proposing to be able to spay or neuter 1,000 cats, we only have, I believe, one full-time vet and maybe a couple part-times. Do we actually have that resource in order to meet that 1,000 cats to be spay or neutered?
Okay, let's suss that out. I gave an example of how much $200,000 if we're just doing cats. If we're doing dogs, it's a much less number because dogs are about $300 to $400 per unit in terms of spay neuter services. And so that's just an example to figure out. We actually have 2 full-time vets and a medical director who is also a vet. In terms of spay neuter, those operations require 3 things: the space, a registered veterinarian technician, which we have 1 licensed right now, and we have 4 in the pipeline to get licensed. And then we also have, and then the vet itself to do the surgery. So we have the resource. For TNR, trap, neuter, and return, those animals are coming in from trappers that we're coordinating with on appointment schedule basis. And so, again, trying to suss out what those differences are. If you're talking about just TNR, we can work with trappers to get them coordinated and get them coordinated either through the in-house vet services or through those contract services. And so we'll use that $200,000 to augment our current staff so that we have more capacity to neuter more. Does that make sense? Did I clarify it?
Yes. The last question I have for you is the volunteers that want to make a big impact and the resource that we need down the ACS, what are you doing to create that relationship where you're not losing the good volunteers, but they're coming towards you and want to help the ACS to be a better place?
So we have many volunteers throughout the organization that are doing many different things. And so whether it's just dog walking or helping the kitten nursery or helping with our medical services or helping just kennel cleaning, kennel opportunities in terms of making sure the dogs are okay. They're all over the place in terms of operations. We have a coordinator that is outreach. We have many volunteers that are wanting to come. We have more volunteers than we can actually use at any given time because it just takes organization to make that happen. We meet with them roughly monthly to kind of explain either a new policy or changes in operation and just create that esprit de corps around things. It is a challenge because it's a people operation, and so that it is a huge challenge for us that we try to do better at every day. And I would say that sometimes you advance by attrition at times, because sometimes those who just aren't fitting into the groove, it's okay for for them to have done their part and move on, but we have many people that are willing to step in and help in various ways. So we're doing everything we can to lean into it. We have a new supervisor there who's also helping in that route, and so whether it's with cats or kittens or with the big dogs and walking them.
All right, thank you very much. I'm out of time.
Thanks, Councilmember. Appreciate it. I've got a few questions. We are getting close to 11, though we can go a little beyond before we get into our next section. I know we have a few council members who would like to do a quick lightning round of follow-up questions. Let me first ask a few of my own. Angel, on the $250,000 pilot for graffiti and illegal dumping enforcement, can you share just quickly a little more about how we will use that? And maybe as you do, I'll ask a question of Nora that can be part of the answer, which is in the March message, we directed the city attorney to come back with an ordinance that would allow SJPD to impound vehicles that are involved in illegal dumping. And so I'd love to get an update on both sides of this, on how we are getting more serious about, again, we know it's a very small number of likely repeat offenders who are really harming our public spaces.
Yeah, sure. Angel Rios, Deputy City Manager. So I think a good place to start is that, you know, we definitely are not waiting until next year's budget to take action on the enforcement front. In fact, what we've done is we've convened a interdepartment blight enforcement team consisting of San Jose PD, code enforcement, Beautify SJ staff, DOT, all the main folks. And what we've done is we tapped into what resources do we currently have to really move the needle. And I think what you've seen, many of you may have seen several arrests around illegal dumpers and graffiti taggers, and there's several more that are imminent. I won't spend too much talking about that since some of those are ongoing investigations, but we have definitely, using the resources that we have really stepped that up, right? San Jose PD has assigned 2 officers specifically around graffiti enforcement and illegal dumping. Looking to the funding for next year, we realize that with that money, you know, you really can't, you know, stand up a whole new strategy, but instead what we're looking at is how do we build on the current momentum and structure that we have. And so what we're looking at doing is basically using some of these funds to pay additional SJPD overtime capacity, some additional code enforcement time and capacity through the retire rehire program. We also are looking at using some of this money to install additional deterrents to reduce graffiti and illegal dumping, and then increasing dumpster days by 20 days per year. We also recognize that, you know, we're not just going to arrest our way out of our way of this. We're not just going to, but we want to definitely send a very strong message that gang graffiti and illegal dumping is not acceptable here in our city, and so we want to take a firm stance there. And then on a parallel track, also really step up our education efforts. And to the extent that we identify young people in the commission of any of these instances, we're also connecting with our Youth Empowerment Alliance resources to really redirect that behavior, right? As opposed to kind of like just you know, sending them down a road that could lead to more criminal activity,
yeah,
right?
We definitely want to see people doing restitution, doing some community service. We've recently had a success story there. Let me turn to Nora. I have a few more questions here. Nora, on the ordinance we discussed related to impounding vehicles involved in the commission of crimes like illegal dumping, how's that progressing?
Thank you, Mayor. We are working on that ordinance. There's no specific authority allowing the impoundment, but there's nothing prohibiting it either.
I believe they do it in LA now.
They do. They do it in some other jurisdictions, and so that's what we're looking at. And we've also just recently started a discussion with some of the staff involved in this on how we might use unfair business practices and civil penalties and injunctions to address some of those issues also.
Great, and if I would consider looking, if it isn't, obviously we want to prioritize illegal dumping. I think we focus there, but if the vehicle's used in a commission of a crime like graffiti on a freeway sign, I think that would, I think we should be thinking a little broadly about the tools we have to create some accountability in these cases. Okay, thank you. Let me move on to Eric, and it's great to see that we now have a CSA outcome associated with the total number of people who are unsheltered, living out on our streets in tents and vehicles, and new performance measures for occupancy rate across all solutions, and average unit vacancy. And I love those new dashboards are fantastic for really understanding where we have capacity, how quickly we're turning around units that have become vacant. It's really going to help us do that performance management work to best utilize the resources the council has provided. I saw on page 289 that roughly the stat at least seems to indicate that 95% of individuals engaging in outreach exit to shelter or PSH. That's great if it's true, and I don't know if that's a target or an actual, but I thought historically on outreach we were seeing that at a much lower rate. Can you just clarify what program that stat is associated with?
Yes, so page 289, so 4.1, prevent people from entering and returning into homelessness. This speaks to, and what the data here that is reporting out on is the investments we've made in the homelessness prevention system since it goes back 3 years. So this is data that we receive from the county regarding our turn on investment of that data.
Okay, so that is not outreach out in encampments.
That is prevention of people entering homelessness, so it's the prevention system.
That's the prevention side
Correct.
that we pay into.
Exactly.
As run by the county and partners. Okay, great. And then last week we, on that point, discussed a bit here at council our investments into the countywide homelessness prevention system, beyond Measure E dollars, which we commit to, 10% of which we commit to prevention. We've invested other dollars into the prevention system. Do we intend to do that again this year? I know our March budget message provided flexibility to look for additional resources. I believe we recently just allocated another $3 million in HAP funding through a recent council action. Can you say a little more about our commitment to prevention?
Yes, so last year the total funding was just about 4.2, 4.3, Jim can correct me on that number. Then we added an additional funding of unencumbered sources that we got through liquidation of HAP dollars to put more into the prevention system, which is what brought the investment up to 7.5. This year, we have the scheduled amount of 5.2 million in the current budget. If there are other resources similarly that are available to put into the prevention system, then we'll bring that back before council for additional investments.
Got it. And obviously, we all can play a role in advocating for those HAP dollars that every year we have to fight for because they're not an ongoing allocation. And then I know we're pushing to be more strategic in how we deploy outreach services, especially this year, as we bring online about 1,400 additional beds, mostly interim housing with private rooms for folks. We've budgeted for 10 positions in housing and additional support staff for similar, in a way, types of outreach functions across the lived-in vehicle, the ALT program, and Beautify SJ. I'm just curious how Housing DOT and PRNS are aligning these resources to create efficiencies and make sure we're really strategically using our limited resources across the organization. And specifically would love to hear how the therapeutic specialists that I'd put in my first budget message that are funded in BSJ, how those would be deployed going forward, how they fit into this overhauling of outreach that you all are undertaking.
So across the departments with DOT, John and myself, we align our outreach efforts as much as possible, particularly in response to, so the three primary criteria is, one is the ADA issues related to abatements, two, aligning to getting the outreach workers out there for the larger abatements as we're beginning to sync up our operations to ensure we can provide offers of shelter as we're expanding the total number of beds. And then three, the coordinated work that we do specifically for new product that is coming online, as we did with Berryessa, we're doing with VDO, and then the upcoming motels. So as we continue to coordinate across the departments in order to get to most efficient outcomes, we're continuing to explore ways in which the outreach teams continue that pre-abatement work and having that engagement to ensure we can maximize the amount of shelter space we're bringing online later this year.
Thanks. And then similar to the new dashboards we have for utilization of shelter and interim housing, I'm curious how you see the reporting, both in terms of the detail and frequency of reporting related to outreach evolving.
So we're compiling based on last year's June council directive on improving the outcomes, and within that had a bunch of outreach criteria, bullet points as well. And then as we're looking at the performance of our existing 10 that we have now of outreach workers, we're putting together a sort of a component of one of the existing dashboards, since it is a feeder into the existing shelter system. What are the most identifiable metrics that we can capture in outreach? Outreach has so many different variables, because it's very case-by-case analysis. So what are some uniform principles, effectively, or questions that we can identify as core performance metrics that we can bring together to then synchronize that into feeding of the shelter system and its overall management?
Okay, great. Thank you. On animal shelter, very quickly, Matt Lesh, the budget message, March budget message, gave direction to produce an MBA that assesses leveraging existing resources to restore TNR and community spay and neuter. This has been brought up by a few colleagues, and I know there was an update in NSC last week. For those of us who weren't there, are you able to elaborate on how many surgeries we're currently performing a week and what our target would be to ramp up to in this coming fiscal year, if you have that handy?
Yeah, thank you for the question. What's interesting is whether it's pure TNR or whether it's spay-neuter surgeries or community, it's all mixed into numbers of surgeries, if I could elaborate it that way. And
sure.
I know you want it by week, and so we have to do a little public math, which is always fun. We did about 6,200 surgeries last year, which was a 30% increase over the year prior. I don't know that we'll get another doubling, another 30% this next year, but my hope is so I'm obviously pushing every metric as far as I can to the positive in every realm, and so if we can, keep pushing those metrics. So we have 45 appointments per week with inside staff. We're going to be bringing on a part-time staff member that will add another 15 to 20 per week on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We have some availability, so this is the details of it that I was giving at NSE last week. We have some availability on Mondays and Fridays with an outside partner who is using our clinic as well. That's not for TNR, but just for spay-neuter surgeries. And so that's why we look at these things as total surgeries, not just as TNR. And so we're trying to get the capacity up in terms of the total surgeries. If we can get them closer to 7,000 to 8,000 in this next year through both partnerships, part-time staff, and then also through our in-house staff. That's what we're pushing to. So then if we divide those by 50, you get to the numbers of surgeries we should be having a week, providing per week. Is that, I know
Thank you. It does, and I understand there's also, there's some seasonality as well, and it's not always going to be just a linear thing.
On average.
I think what would be great is just by the time we take a vote in June to, so in about whatever it is, 5 weeks from now or so, to know kind of what that target is, how much, like just for our advocates, the media, our community members, how much we think we can grow it. If it's 5%, 10%, 20%, whatever we think with everything we're doing overall, how much more capacity we'll have. Since that feels in the long run to be a sort of key component of our ability to really get a handle on the
It's one of many things to deal with this multivariate problem that we're dealing with. And I think we're due to publish an MBA through the city manager's office in the next week or so.
Great, thank you. And then my final question for Jill, just to put Jill on the spot for a moment since I bugged everybody else. You know, one of the programs that I think has been most impactful from what I can tell coming out of the pandemic was the funding we dedicated to high dosage tutoring. And I'll just say, as I've said many times, but just for the record, I think it is disgraceful that we as a state, despite spending more per pupil than almost any other state, we're a top 5, top 6 spender. Last time I checked the data, have over 60% of our children not on grade level for reading. And we all know that 3rd grade is that key moment where you go from, I'm seeing this with my children as they're approaching this point, you go from learning to read to reading to learn. And it becomes progressively harder to catch up if you're not on grade level at 3rd grade and staying there and beyond. When I was a middle school teacher on our east side, I saw kids who came to us 2-3 years behind grade level. It became very hard to help kids catch up. I'm curious, we've been having some conversations with superintendents. Some of our dollars in the public sector are falling away, but there is a lot of money being spent in the K through 12 system in California. There's a lot of philanthropic interest. I'm curious how you see, and it may not be in this coming fiscal year, but if you take a slightly longer term view, how do you see the library system playing a role in that ecosystem of making sure all of our young people are on grade level, particularly for reading, particularly early, because we know just how critical that is for all the other things that we then try to chase down later, as we've talked about.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So the city did implement a 2-year Tutoring Matters grant program, which we are in the end of the second year, so we're doing an assessment. We'll soon have numbers in terms of outcomes of that work. So that's one thing. But we do have an annual program called SJ Learns, San Jose Learns, in partnership with multiple school districts to extend the school day learning. And we have consistent data to show that, and these are students that are identified by the schools as falling behind between kindergarten and 3rd grade, and getting them back up to grade level. And so consistently, the outcomes are 80% and higher when they get that additional high dosage tutoring, as you noted. And so I think, to answer your question, I think the library is very well positioned, and this is something we're thinking about, is that as we support the Children and Youth Services Master Plan in the space of education, we are working with children from birth to TK, from TK to 3rd grade, from grade school through high school and into employment and hopefully graduation. And so as part of those strategies, we have resources that we could leverage towards a really shared goal, which could be the grade level reading by 3rd grade as a major indicator of future success. So everything from birth to 3rd grade could really be around that. And we've had preliminary conversations with our school superintendents through the School City Collaborative, and some of your colleagues have been at some of those meetings. And there is a lot of interest in partnering in this space. So I think that's something that we are interested in the fall, bringing together ideas around how could we set sort of a big audacious goal, possibly in the next year, to be able to ensure that all children are at grade level by 3rd grade, knowing that then they can learn better, the outcomes are better for almost every other aspect of their future. And one of the drawbacks for the library is that we, unlike the schools, we are not constantly assessing reading level, right? So we need those critical partners in the education space in order to buy in and be able to see progress if we were to set that as an indicator. But I think that we are all on the same page in terms of wanting that to happen.
Great. Well, I really appreciate your engaging in those conversations. And look, as you just pointed out, it's not our core area of responsibility or competency, and yet we do have a core city service in our library system that can play a role as long as our school districts and others are willing to meet us part way and be collaborative. It's not an area where we can lead. Our community relies on us to lead on public safety, getting people housed, clean and safe streets, infrastructure, land use, all of our core areas of responsibility that only we can do, that are not the school districts or the county's responsibility. But this is an area where I think strategically our just incredible library system can help accelerate a goal that helps us get upstream of some of the things we are responsible for addressing, and we can be strategic even in a situation where we don't have a lot of new budget resources to throw at the problem. So I wanted to just highlight that, and I appreciate you having those conversations. You look like you wanted to, I'll give you the last word on that, and then I'm going to turn to colleagues.
I did just want to add that one of the challenges that our school districts are facing, and it's in the media quite a bit, is really the very basic reality of being able to provide books and reading materials at the schools to support the children in their homes, and that is our core competency.
That's right.
So we are in conversations with individual districts about unique strategies we might partner with the overarching goal of ensuring that every school has not only reading materials to support their education, but it's so important is to support their joy of reading. And that means, current, interesting, good-looking collections. And every district's going to be possibly a different solution, but we're starting those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's right on. Awesome. Okay, thank you all. So We still have a few hands up. We're going to do lightning round. Typically on our second round of questions, we limit to 5 minutes. So I'm going to ask colleagues to be judicious with your time. We are a little behind schedule. That's okay. That typically happens on the budget study sessions, particularly with the really meaty ones, like the ones we're tackling today. So I'll do my best to keep us on track. But let's do a quick lightning round. Councilmember Campos.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a quick procedural question. Is there a reason why members of the public who are here to provide public comment on this item are not given the opportunity to do so?
So what we do with our study sessions, as agendized, as I announced, and is always what we do for our mini council study sessions through the year, is that study sessions an opportunity for the council to have dialogue, get updates from staff, and ask questions of staff. We do reserve time at the end of the study session each day for public comment. Otherwise, there's no way we will get, if we do comment after each section, there's no way we will get through the content, not just today, but over the coming days, because we have so much material to get through together through these study sessions. So it's very different from a council meeting where we do public comment and take a vote on each item.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Yep. I know that we do want to have the ability to listen to our public who is here today, so I just wanted to ask that.
Yeah. We do have public hearings scheduled, and we're doing community town halls, at least one in every district. In many districts, we're doing more than one. And then we have an actual public hearing on the budget, which is typically the time where we get a large crowd out to get a lot of feedback. But there are many touch points throughout the process.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, let me turn to Councilmember Salas.
I'll make this brief. Eric, this question is to you. And I want to build off of Councilmember Campos's, and even the mayor brought it up about homeless prevention, how critical and important it is. We have about, as I looked at the budget, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, around $650,000 for the city support of homeless prevention, and then we give about $4 million, I think, to the county for theirs, roughly. When I call the city number, and to your credit or your department's credit, someone answers the phone. It's really amazing, actually, because that doesn't happen very much in this day and age. When I call the county, I get a recording that says, "We'll get back to you within 2 days." And I always picture someone desperate, and they're thinking 2 days. It just seems like an eternity. My question to you is, do you feel confident that the numbers you get from the county and the support we're getting from the county is worth the $4 million, if on the order of? And as importantly, is there anything we can do to help to facilitate the county-city relationship relative to preventive homelessness?
Thank you, Councilmember, for the question. So I work a lot with county staff. I don't have data to counter the county's provided data on the effectiveness of prevention. We always look very critically at any data that is provided to ensure that it is reaching the outcomes of the stated investment and it is in compliance with our contracts. Our current sort of hotline call that you mentioned, that is likely into our rapid rehousing program, which is a program that the city runs. It's very, very similar to prevention. It's just sort of an alternate intervention point. As I had mentioned earlier to Councilmember Dewan's question, it comes at sort of, they've already hit the homeless system, they're existing in a shelter, but it's less than 30 days, and we capture them through sort of a rapid rehousing program. Again, it looks very similar to prevention, so it's a bit of a different system than what the county runs on the prevention side. But as we continue the investments, we are going to continue to ensure that any and all data we receive regarding the effectiveness of outcomes is thoroughly reviewed, and if data is presented that the investments are not getting to the intended outcomes, then we'll bring that before council for consideration.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councilmember. Let's go to Councilmember Cohen.
All right, 2 quick follow-up questions. One on back to the Berryessa Youth Center question. These programmatic changes do not affect our ROC after-school programs. Is that correct?
That's correct. It doesn't. Although we do have some schools closing, so there won't be ROC programs there. There is an ACES program that's in the budget that we're cutting, but I'm told Berryessa has already found another provider to use that money and go and still provide the services, so that's good news there as well.
Okay, thank you. And then a follow-up question on Olive. So there was, when we started by identifying these original locations for Olive, there was a snapshot in time done with looking around the city. Obviously, as we make adjustments, new locations are occurring, is there going to be like a next second round of that outreach, or are you going to be using at this point input from council offices and other places to enhance that list if we find that there's some other problematic areas?
Thank you, Councilmember. And John Rista, Director of Transportation. We are underway with the second citywide inventory right now. Should wrap that up in May. And yes, we're going to look for input from council offices as we go through another briefing prior to setting the next 50 sites.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, colleagues, for being brief and to the point. We are going to transition. Thank you all for the report on neighborhood services. We are now transitioning to our CSA on public safety, and we'll take a moment for the transition. All right. We are coming back and continuing on with our public safety CSA. Anybody back in the green room hopefully can still hear with the speakers back there, but I think we should jump in. And Chief Sapien, are you kicking us off?
I will kick us off. Thank
Great.
you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Good morning. I am Fire Chief Robert Sapien. It is my pleasure to offer the presentation of the Public Safety City Service Area Fiscal Year 2025-2026 Proposed Operating Budget. The Public Safety CSA includes the Fire Department, Police Department, the Office of Emergency Management, and the Office of the Independent Police Auditor. With me today is Chief of Police Paul Joseph, Office of Emergency Management Director Raymond Reardon, and Independent Police Auditor Eddie Aubry. Collectively, the Public Safety CSA mission is to provide prevention and emergency response services for crime, fire, medical, hazardous materials, and disaster-related situations. Public Safety CSA outcomes are: 1, a safer San Jose with effective emergency response, and 2, resilient communities that are prepared for emergencies. The Fire Department's mission is to protect life, property, and the environment through prevention and response, providing all hazards emergency response, including fire, rescue, hazardous materials, and emergency medical services. For the Police Department, the core services include crime prevention and community education, investigative services, regulatory services, and response to calls for service and patrol support. The role of the City Manager's Office of Emergency Management is to guide the city's emergency management program and to promote and collaborate with our regional and community partners to build comprehensive and sustainable posture of resilience. And finally, the Independent Police Auditor provides independent civilian oversight of the San Jose Police Department by taking in complaints from members of the public about San Jose police officers, auditing internal and external misconduct investigations, preparing annual public reports, making recommendations to improve SJPD policies, participating in the department's review of officer-involved shooting incidents, and conducting community outreach and engagement. In terms of the budget programs that the city has implemented, this slide represents a sample of our CSA's programs. The full program listing can be found in each department section of the proposed operating budget. The Fire Department section can be found starting on page 511 and includes the following budget program areas: fire and emergency medical services response to provide residents high-quality fire and medical emergency response services in their most critical time of need. Fire and emergency medical services dispatch to ensure clear communication and appropriate deployment of resources as the department's first responders. Special operations, including the hazardous incident team, urban search and rescue, and aircraft rescue and firefighting. Fire sworn training and fire safety education, review, and inspections. The Police Department section can be found starting on page 679 and includes the following budget program areas: Field Patrol, 911 Communications Center, Special Operations, Air Support and other patrol support units, Crime Prevention, Coffee with a Cop, School Safety, and School Liaison, Homicide, Sexual Assaults, Gang Investigations, Family Violence, and Internal Affairs, Gaming, Cannabis Regulation, and Police Permits. The Office of Emergency Management section can be found starting on page 401 and includes the following budget program areas: Community Emergency Response Team, Emergency Operations Center Capital Project, Community-Focused Emergency Planning. And finally, The independent police auditor section can be found starting on page 577 and includes the following budget program areas: oversight of police misconduct complaints and public outreach, independent police auditor management and administration. This slide represents our CSA's performance measure dashboard, which can also be found on page 296 of the 2025-2026 proposed operating budget book. The 6 identified performance measures on this dashboard are as follows. Fire emergency responsiveness measures the department's time standard for priority 1, or red lights and sirens, responses for an arrival on scene within 8 minutes 80% of the time. This time standard includes call processing, turnout, and travel time segments. The response time has slightly improved compared to actuals realized in fiscal year 23-24. However, the department continues to navigate through response constraints. For example, ambulance availability, and is estimated to achieve a 67% compliance target. The fire department will continue to monitor compliance levels and anticipate improvement in response times as fire stations become operationalized. Quality of fire protection and prevention is part of the City of San Jose's community survey that measures the % of residents providing feedback on the quality of protection and prevention as good or excellent. The fire department anticipates a 66% estimate for this measure. Police emergency calls for service and reports measures the % of 911 calls that are answered in less than 15 seconds. The target for this measure is 90%. The police department is estimated to achieve a target of 90% for this year. Police emergency responsiveness measures the department's priority 1 service calls for present or imminent danger to life or major damage or loss of property. This measure includes call processing time, call queuing time, and drive time. The target for this measure is to respond within 6 minutes, 60% of the time. The response time has decreased slightly. Quality of police protection measures the % of residents surveyed who rate the quality of police protection in their neighborhood as good or excellent. The department's estimate is estimated to be, or anticipated to be, 24%. Resident household emergency preparedness measures the % of residents providing a rating of household preparedness for a natural disaster of other citywide emergency as well prepared or somewhat prepared. This measure will continue to be monitored to assess public preparedness. The total public safety CSA shows minimal changes in the proposed operating budget for 25-26. The 0.6% change for the fire department is pursuant of the administration's direction to minimize impacts to the general fund during the development cycle. Key requests include the establishment of a first responder fee program, continuation of evacuation notification software, augmented staffing within the fire communications division, and engine company staffing for the upcoming operation of Fire Station 32. The 2.5% augmentation to the police department is attributable to one-time funding opportunities such as $3 million towards safety and security measures in key activation areas throughout the city to help ensure well-coordinated and secure sporting events experiences set to happen locally in 2026, as well as augmented staffing levels to stand up the Neighborhood Quality of Life Unit under the Bureau of Field Operations. And finally, the Office of Emergency Management seeks to allocate ongoing funding to implement an AI-driven platform that provides improved emergency preparedness through the advanced evacuation modeling and disaster preparedness modeling. For fiscal year 25-26, the public safety partners will keep the course to deliver quality services to the residents of San Jose. The priorities you see on this slide are a sample of the objectives of which the CSA will continue to advance in this upcoming year. The following are a few key budget actions for the Public Safety CSA, including pursuant to Mayor's March budget message, the Public Safety CSA seeks to position itself with one-time funding for planning, preparation, and security measures for the upcoming sporting events to be hosted in Silicon Valley in 2026. As mentioned earlier, both the fire and police departments seek to augment staffing through the following actions. For the police department, Bureau of Field Operations established the Neighborhood Quality of Life Unit that will enable the department in building strong relationships between law enforcement and local communities to address crime and quality of life issues, as well as enforce the responsibility to shelter policy that will be discussed later in this presentation. For the fire department, increase the department's minimum staffing levels to incorporate the upcoming operations of Fire Station 32 with an engine company positioned in Council District 7. Additionally, the department recommends the implementation of the First Responder Fee Program effective January 2026, pursuant to the City Council's approval on March 25th of this year. This fee program is a cost recovery mechanism for the EMS care provided by the first responders. With this implementation, the fire department seeks to add 1 staff captain and 1 senior analyst position for effective program delivery. The Public Safety CSA serves to maintain a vibrant and safe community. We do this with a collaborative approach in providing essential emergency services that meet the community's needs with a focus on the use of data analytics to inform and improve strategies. Specifically, the following service delivery strategies are anticipated to continue as we enter this upcoming fiscal year. The fire department will continue to provide high-quality fire dispatch, suppression, rescue, emergency medical, and other related public assistance services. The police department's goal is to maintain the safety of residents throughout the city by keeping crime rates down, reducing and investigating crimes. We will also focus on hiring and training highly qualified officers and provide effective, timely response to calls for service. The Office of Emergency Management will continue to deliver internal trainings, enhance the Community Emergency Response Team program, and engage in community outreach for emergency preparedness, enhancing the city's readiness for the next major event. And the Independent Police Auditor's Office will continue to ensure that San Jose Police Department's investigations of police misconduct complaint process are fair, thorough, and complete. This concludes the Public Safety CSA presentation. We will begin the responsibility to shelter presentation, which will be provided by City Attorney Nora Fryman, Chief of Police Paul Joseph, and Housing Director Eric Sullivan, after which we will be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. The program, can we get to the, I don't have the slide. Eric, can you or somebody? It's just 2. If you can do it, that'd be great. Can you? Thanks, Chief. Thank you. So we are following up today on some proposals that were in the March budget message. Our office was directed to work with the city manager's office and other staff to review ordinances that might need to either be rewritten or amended or actually drafted concerning a number of areas in the currently in the municipal code, things such as trespassing on city property, trash accumulation, 72-hour parking, and a number of others. There are 8 total that we are working on and we'll be bringing to council in June. There was also a referral to our office and the administration to review a responsibility to shelter policy. And this would be either implemented in the municipal code or through procedures with the different city departments. And then the city manager was to dedicate staff within the police department to look at a particular policing model from San Diego. Next slide. The work that we're doing and the legal considerations that are being reviewed right now include, as I say, preparing updates to various provisions in the San Jose Municipal Code and certain provisions that impact damage to city-owned property. We are also reviewing this idea of an offer to shelter and a refusal of shelter and whether it creates a legal requirement of acceptance. Thus far, we think that it does not, but we are continuing to look at that and look at how the information that staff is collecting about refusals to shelter might inform decisions about prosecutions for trespass and other areas where we can improve on our work in requiring that the provisions of the municipal code be followed. So we're working with the police department on best practices for aiding the documentation of refusal to shelter. There'll be more on some of that in this presentation. We, as an office, have a small prosecution team that handles municipal code prosecutions. Our decisions to charge cases are based on whether there is probable cause that a particular defendant committed a violation of the municipal code, whether we believe there's sufficient evidence to prove each of the elements beyond a reasonable doubt at trial, and whether the prosecution of the case is in the interest of justice. Those are our ethical obligations as prosecutors, and those are the considerations that we take each time we review a case. When prosecuting cases involving the unhoused population, we attempt to engage in resolutions to connect defendants with services and prevent future violations and hopefully to help an individual avoid a criminal record. We've been starting discussions with the county, with the DA's office. We intend to talk with the public defender's office, as that office often represents people who are involved with violations of the municipal code. These are very low level, either infractions or misdemeanors. And we want to know and understand what alternatives they may consider, both the courts as well as the public defenders, and to understand what might be available for some of the diversion processes that already exist. We are also going to be looking at whether it's possible for the city to develop a pre-filing diversion program, because we do not have one now. We are completely dependent on those services that are currently available. So we're continuing those discussions with the county and different branches within the county and, as I say, the courts. We will be coordinating with county council to see if there is a way to use the care courts. It's a voluntary process, but if the goal is to get people who need services into a structure where they can receive some services, we want to find out how we might be able to do that. And then we are also working with housing and other partners here within the city to see how the enhanced engagement program can assist us in giving, if there is a decision to prosecute, giving the courts and others in the system a fuller picture of someone so that hopefully they can be connected with services that are effective for them. So with that, I think next up is Eric.
Thank you. So Eric Sullivan, Director of Housing. So as Nora had mentioned, the Enhanced Engagement Program, the intent here is how do we first look at strategies in which to better provide and coordinate with what the Chief will discuss later today, the Neighborhood Quality of Life Program. First, to fund the program, what we're going to look to do, as mentioned during the prior session, is further compress our existing outreach contracts and then look to establish 3 additional FTEs who will be part of this particular team. It'll work under our existing outreach program, but it'll be sort of a separately charged initiative, whereas we think about engagement in kind of 3 phases. Sort of phase 1 is our engagement that we do to move individuals from existing encampments into shelter. Phase 2 is work that we do in coordination with PRNS and Johnson Sorelli's team around abatements that are further out in the abatement schedule. And then phase 3 is the work that we do in response to particular individuals or much smaller encampments in areas throughout the city. This enhanced engagement program is intended to focus primarily on that sort of phase 2 with those larger engagements. And so we would create a team, a subset of the existing outreach team to do that work, and then look to better coordinate across the different departments to ensure that all outreach is standardized with existing data collection procedures, as well as ways in which we're capturing that data more fully to get to, as Nora had mentioned, a fuller picture of the challenges that individuals may be experiencing and ways to subvert them into existing service options. The EEP duties will, and just to make this clear, not engage in any police activity. Chief we'll get into some of the work that the Neighborhood Quality of Life Unit will get into, so this will stand separate and apart from that work. It will really look at, as I mentioned, the long-term encampments, the larger encampments, those that have particular needs, and identifying ways in which we can continue to make offers of shelter and housing, as well as address existing code of conduct issues, and working with both the encampments and surrounding communities to identify ways in which we can better collect our comprehensive set of data of those who have the most needs, and where do we identify those ways to transition those individuals into shelter and housing, and to track those offers of shelter housing accordingly to get to that comprehensive picture of all the needs that an individual may have. In addition, the EEP will also work with encampment occupants to look at and help identify some of those who have chronic service and health needs. And so where do we, in getting ahead of the abatement schedule, create more opportunity for connection to services, as well as capturing a comprehensive case file. So part of the work that is to be done is setting up that standard operating procedure for this engagement of work, ensuring that we have in the administration of all of our outreach work, it becomes standardized and we're able to get to a comprehensive file collection, similar as we do now with existing outreach work, where we're able to capture data on the needs as we create, as an example, by name list for existing shelter that is coming online. We would be expanding upon that local file that we would be collecting, and then working with the police department on when is that point of time in which we're sharing information with the neighborhood quality of life unit that Chief Joseph will get into in the next slide.
Thank you, Eric. Paul Joseph, Chief of Police. So the budget as proposed will direct us to create a neighborhood quality of life unit. That unit would consist of 1 sergeant and 6 officers, and the purpose of the unit is to mitigate the impacts of unsheltered homelessness on the city by enforcing various criminal violations. Where possible and appropriate, the unit's also going to work with these unsheltered individuals to connect them with available services, including shelter, obviously. And as part of that effort, one of our goals is to continue taking nonviolent misdemeanor arrestees to the Mission Street Recovery Station. Now that's a county-run facility where currently we're able to take arrestees for first-time DUI violations and some lower-level drug offenses. And we can bring them there instead of taking them to the jail. When they arrive, they're met by various counselors and social workers and people that can assist them with issues they may be having. And we want to expand our current MOU that we have with the county, which only covers certain offenses, to cover a much broader inclusive list of arrestees. And then we'll work with the county on that. And thus far, some of the conversations I've had have been encouraging in that regard. So the way in which this responsibility to shelter really will be operationalized is to make it a part of the code of conduct, which the code of conduct does not have legal authority itself, but it's an administrative means that guides PRNS when they're making decisions about which encampments need to be abated. The encampments that are more orderly and less impactful to the surrounding areas get a lower priority for abatement, and the ones where the occupants are not following this code of conduct will get prioritized for abatement. Some of the current practices that might speed up an abatement, or prioritize it, I should say, is if an individual person's living space is larger than this 12 by 12 by 12 area, they're blocking the public right-of-way with trash or other items. If there's bio-waste that's spilling and things of that nature, you'll see there's a whole variety of different types of conduct that could make an encampment problematic for its neighbors, and that would speed up an abatement. So the code of the refusal to accept shelter is actually a way in which the police department can coordinate with the housing's engagement team to be sure that before anyone's abated, there have been multiple attempts to get everybody in that encampment connected to whatever services are available, primarily shelter. So how do we go forward from here? Well, we have to set this program up, and that's going to be a combined effort between ourselves, the city attorney, and the housing department. The outreach and engagement will be conducted by housing, and they're developing a way to track that to ensure that we know we've in fact done all of that engagement. The coordination between the police department and the housing department, and as Director Sullivan mentioned, clear separation of duties. The housing engagement folks are not involved in enforcement in any way, but it's more just a matter of ensuring to us that they've done all of that engagement and all of those offers of shelter. Enforcement and maintenance, particularly of our no encampment zones, that's really going to be our responsibility as the police department, hoping to get, like I said, anybody that does have to be arrested over to the Mission Street Recovery Station as opposed to jail. And then finally, sustaining that is an ongoing effort by housing and by the police department. And with that, we will take questions.
Great, thank you all. Really appreciate all of the policy work that has gone into sort of iterating on this concept and how we tie it all together with bringing outreach in-house, updating code of conduct, partnering with the county. I know we've had good meetings with various counterparts, DA, public defender, and are exploring this Mission Street Recovery Center as a potential destination for folks who are repeatedly refusing shelter and need to talk to a counselor, may need treatment or other help. I think it's a pretty balanced approach, particularly in light of cities we're seeing outright ban camping without offers of shelter and looking to enforce a strict camping ban or banning tents altogether, again, without expanding shelter services. Or the governor's announcement this morning, which I think is largely aligned with where we're going, but is pretty aggressive on effectively banning encampments. I think in San Jose, we're trying to take a very pragmatic, practical, holistic, compassionate middle ground of dramatically scaling up safe places where people can be with sanitation, security, 3 meals a day, case management, shelter and services, with an emphasis on those supportive services, but certainly not sustainable for folks to choose to camp. We'll have more discussion, and really we're going to focus in on questions about implementation, but we are at just about noon. As everybody knows, we have a break scheduled. So if that section is complete, we will pick up with council questions when we get back at 1:30, and then we'll continue on with our other, I don't know that we'll get to all of the, I think we have 3 more sections today that may flow into our Wednesday study sessions. But we'll come back with council questions at 1:30. Until then, we'll be on recess. Thank you.